Hi everybody, this is for Contra One, otherwise known as Jack, and I've been telling you that I was going to mention our family's next car after the 1958 Rambler Cross Country. That car had some problems, some engine problems, and in 1961 my dad considered getting a brand new car, which was really the second time that happened. It happened with the Henry J in 1952. So here again in 1961, we were looking at a brand new car. And this time we went to the Ford dealer. This is the local Ford dealer. And we were looking at the Falcon, the four-door Falcon. Now this was the second year of its manufacture, and it was a little changed from 1960, mostly in the grille and trim, but essentially the same car. This time, in the first year, the 144 cubic inch engine, six-cylinder, was what was offered, and this time in 1961 they started offering the new 170 cubic inch engine, which looks like it was just a longer stroke version of the original, and it was good for 101 horsepower, whereas the 144 cubic inch engine was good for 85 horsepower. Well, the salesman who showed us the car was a very agreeable guy, and a funny guy too, and he was of, shall we say, generous girth. He was a big guy, and he wanted to demonstrate how big the Falcon trunk was. So believe it or not, he got in the trunk and closed the trunk lid over, so he completely fit in the trunk. Now, not everybody would be going to that with that extent to sell a car, but an interesting guy, a funny guy. So my dad was interested, but of course he wanted to get the least expensive car available, and he almost did that. He wound up getting the four-door version. The two-door version would have probably been a little bit cheaper, and it had a heater, a radio, backup lights, and three-speed manual transmissions, standard equipment, and it was the small engine. It was a 144 cubic inch engine. Well, it ran pretty successfully. It seemed to work well. The paint was good, and the interior wore well, except it was, I'd say, pretty sparse. The materials were okay, but they certainly weren't fancy. Now, Ford offered an upscale version, the Futura, but this definitely was not the Futura. This was the base four-door, six-cylinder car, and the paint was good. I had no qualms about the paint, and we ran that car for approximately 2 years. Now, during that time, my father didn't like to shift gears a lot, so I mean he would go from low to high gear, and didn't do any damage to the clutch or anything, but probably should have been shifted more. So it might have explained why there is a brace that goes across the top of the passenger compartment, about where the B post would be in the car. That is separating the front from the back doors. Well, that B post suddenly became detached on the one end, so that the only thing holding it up on the one side was the headliner. So that wasn't exactly much of a reinforcement. So that wound up at the body shop, and it was tack welded back into place. So that was the end of that problem. Other interesting things about that car, the being a manual transmission car, it was a little bit dicey to have the backup lights because they depended on a mechanism under the hood that responded to the linkage being put into reverse. And there was a switch, and the switch had it was metal, but it had cardboard parts that helped to insulate it from the surround. So it was a strange thing, and it just plain wore out, didn't work. So I wired in a separate switch on the inside of the car, so that all you had to do was just trip that switch, and you had the backup lights on. The problem would be if you forgot that the switch was on. So, but anyhow, more seriously with this car, the starter gave problems, and this happened when my dad was driving it, and he started and turned the key, and nothing happened. And it turns out it would just be a shattering noise. The starter was engaging, but something happened. And it turned out that according to the mechanics of Ford, the Bendix gear on the end of the starter was shattering. And it happened not once, but I think it happened 3 times. The last time it happened, the Bendix gear itself wound up enmeshed in the clutch, so they had to fish that out of the clutch. Not very satisfactory, and it didn't seem like if this had been a continual problem, Ford might have had an updated part that was more durable and installed that, but it didn't look like that was happening. So that was kind of a disappointment, and to me it's a big thing when a car doesn't start, when a car isn't reliable. And in this case it generally ran, but there was the occasional situation where not only didn't it start, but you had to get it to a repair shop to get it fixed. So that was not a good mark against the car. And the other issue with that car was a high-pitched squeal coming from the engine compartment. Now I heard it, and it was we took it back to the Ford dealer. The service manager listened to it, didn't hear anything, but I was adamant about it, and a couple of mechanics stopped by, and one of them did hear it. And I think that whole scenario was directly attributable to the occupational hazard of working in an environment that has lots of loud noises. Damages hearing over the long haul. So high frequency pitches probably weren't hearable to some of the mechanics. So yeah, they looked at it and they decided that the valve train wasn't getting enough oil. Somehow the oil passages were just not, they were maybe partially plugged or not of sufficient diameter, so that the oil wasn't getting up into the rocker arms, at least not to the level that it should have been. Well, even though the car ran pretty well, it had about 30,000 miles, I think, I decided in the meantime I had gotten my first new car, and I will backtrack in my next video about my car ownership in the family to the 63 Dodge Dart. So wound up that my parents wound up getting the 63 Dart and trading in the Falcon, and I got a brand new 64 Dodge Dart convertible. But that's subject to another story and another day. So I hope you enjoyed the little story about the Falcon. Overall, I think it was a pleasant car. The Styling was good. The materials were okay, but it had a couple marks against it with the starter and with the oil distribution. Other than that, ran pretty good. So hope you enjoyed my my little story here. I'll see you again.